Now, I know what your next question is. Well, Jasmine, what do you do when heaven or God or whoever or whatever doesn't even meet the need? What do you do when the money still don't show up and the bill is due? What do you do when the light still got cut off, or the car still got repossessed, or the house still got foreclosed on, or your loved one still didn't get the healing, or your child didn't get the scholarship and that was the only way they were going to be able to go to school? What do you do when the ultimate noun does not do the necessary verbs? Hey y'all, hey, it's your girl Quay. Welcome to the Heaven and Mind channel, where we just want to keep him in your mind and in your conversation. And on this episode, we're going to be talking about how does heaven help you today and every day? Because if you're someone who believes that heaven is some faraway future place for after you die, I believe that you are missing some of the real life right now benefits that heaven can offer you, especially when the situations get tough and the struggle gets real. But before I jump into how heaven can help you, I want to set the scene for where this episode was birthed from, because the struggle got real for me. It was the day after Christmas 2022, and I was going on my third day of not having running water, because I'm from Texas. And when the temperatures drop below freezing, we usually have cold and complications. That's what I call it. We have cold and we got complications. So we were dealing with busted pipes and water leaks in my apartment complex from the freeze. So the complex cuts the water off Christmas Eve. So we don't have running water on Christmas Eve. We don't have running water on Christmas. And as I'm doing my devotion the day after Christmas, I'm like in my feelings, because now I'm just mad. We don't have running water in my apartment. So I've been going to my mom's house to like shower and take care of like hygiene needs. I've been bringing buckets of water back to my apartment for like flushing the toilet and stuff. And so I'm just not really feeling it. On top of the fact that the entire week leading up to Christmas, I had been sick. So I didn't even know if I was going to be able to be with my family on Christmas, because I had been sick the entire week leading up to Christmas. So I didn't feel good on top of all of that. Not to mention also dealing with the fact that several of my Christmas packages came up missing. You know, when they send you the delivery notifications, but the package ain't where it's supposed to be, and don't nobody know where it is. And so it's Christmas, so you're really not able to talk to anybody. And so the gift that I was really most worried about was this ring that me and my cousins had all chipped in to buy my grandmother for Christmas. And so I'm passing out IOUs on Christmas. I'm sick and I don't have running water. I'm going back and forth from here to there. And so I'm doing my devotion time the day after. And so I'm feeling like my prayers are falling on deaf ears. I feel like God is doing nothing to help me in my situation. Because it's the holidays, we're not getting a whole lot of communication from the front office. We don't have no information on how long it's going to take for them to fix whatever's going on or what's going on. And so I just really felt like I was stuck in limbo. And so I'm just like, all right, if I'm supposed to be creating this channel where I'm encouraging people to think about heaven more often, it's got to be beneficial to do so. So I found myself asking the very question of this episode: God, how does heaven help me today? I'm in this middle of all of this uncomfortability. I've got all these, situations happening. I'm not feeling my best. I'm praying every morning, and yet it still feels like nothing's getting done. So how is heaven supposed to help me? And in the middle of all of this is where what I'm getting ready to share with you was birth. So the first thing that I feel like God shared with me in how heaven helps us today and every day is that heaven strengthens us through relationship. Heaven strengthens us through relationship. Now, I believe that this is the most undervalued, underrated, and underutilized benefit of keeping heaven in mind, especially when the tough situations come. Because if you're like me, 9 times out of 10, when you find yourself in that situation, or you get that phone call, or that predicament just pops up out of nowhere and kind of blindsides you, we tend to lean to the relationships that we are most familiar with. So whether you call your mom like I did, or your significant other, or your sibling, or your best friend, or whatever, we typically lean on the people who have proven to offer us something in the past that was beneficial to us in our situation. Whether that was they came through with the resources that we need, they provided the encouragement, just their presence in your life was beneficial, or them talking to you always comforts you. Whatever that is, we have a tendency to lean into that when we find ourselves in the situation that we're in, even if they cannot fix the situation for us. Just the mere fact that they answered the phone for you, even though you know that they're at work, that's meaningful for you. Or the fact that they promised to check on you because they couldn't get off right now, but hey, when I get off, I'm gonna come by your house. You need me to bring you something to eat. Is there anything that you need? There is a shift in perspective when you're able to be like, all right, let me just make it till 5:30 or 6 o'clock when so-and-so is going to come over. And that uplifts you and gives you a certain sense of comfort in those moments, knowing that at the very least you got people who are praying for you and who promise to check up on you, and you know they're going to be true to their word. And so all of those things provide you strength in those moments because they are grounded in the nature of the relationship that you have built with them. Whether that's past times they showed up for you, or whether that's just who they are, and you know that if they say they're going to do it, it's going to get done. But whatever that is, we lean on those familiar relationships. Well, this is the same kind of relationship that Jesus died to reestablish between us and heaven. It's the relationship that says no matter what's going on or what time of day, you have immediate access to God. You have somebody who is going to always answer the phone for you. And the difference is you don't have to wait on God to take off work. You don't have to wait on God to stop by later on. God is always and already with you in those moments when the situation arises. But the real questions that we have to ask ourselves, though, when it comes to our relationship with God versus our relationship with these other people that we tend to lean on, are these. Does my relationship with God mean as much to me as these other relationships? We can say, oh, God is the number one in my life. You know, he's the head of my life or whatever. All of that sounds great. But the question is, does the relationship that you have with God actually mean as much or more than these other people that you're counting on? The second thing we have to ask ourselves is, does God's presence in our lives actually do something for us in those moments? I know that my best friend is going to come check on me if I'm in the middle of a situation, or if I'm sick, she's going to bring me something, and that helps me. Does knowing that God is with me actually help me? Does God's presence actually mean something in those moments? Does the fact that we can talk to God really help? Does God's encouragement and his word and the Bible and scripture actually comfort us when we find ourselves in those situations? Does knowing that God is always checking up on you, does that uplift you? Does that make you feel like you can make it for another hour or another 2 hours or so? Or do we throw away all of the benefits of simply being in relationship with God if God chooses not to fix the situation? Because here's the thing. The people that we lean on in the tough situations can't really fix the situation for us. They just provide things that keep us moving, keep us encouraged, keep us motivated as we are walking through that tough situation or that season of grief or that season of loss, etc. They can't fix it, but they uphold us by way of relationship. This is the reason why I think that heaven strengthening us and God strengthening us through relationship is so undervalued and underrated and underutilized, because if we're honest, most of us only look at God as a fixer. I don't want to talk to you if you're not going to fix it. Forget the relationship. If you're this all-powerful God and you're not going to fix it, what do I have to say to you? I don't even want you here if you're not going to fix it. Because what purpose do you serve? I don't care what you have to say in these moments if you're going to choose not to fix it. This is what we have to analyze about being in relationship with God and be honest about, which is, do we throw away the relationship if God says, I'm going to leave you in it? Do we get rid of all the relational benefits because it looks like God is not going to come through or that God is not going to fix it? Because for many of us, we have a tendency to cut God off in those moments or distance ourselves from God. But here is what you're really cutting yourself off from. If you tend to be the kind of person who leans towards, I don't want to hear nothing you got to say if you're not going to help me or fix the situation that I'm in. You have a relationship with the King. If you are saved and you've placed your faith in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you have a relationship with the King, but not just any relationship. You are a child of the King. You are a joint heir to the kingdom. Heaven is your home and the door is always open. That is all of what you have access to. And all of what you throw away when you don't value the relationship you have with God simply because you only see God as a fixer. And the whole reason why you have access to the full strength of heaven and all of the resources of heaven is because all of that was established through a series of other relationships. So Hebrews 4:14 through 16 says this: "Therefore, since we have a high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." Now, the reason why we can be confident in verse 16 and going boldly before the throne is because of all the other relationships that were established in verses 14 and 15. Jesus is the high priest. That is the relationship that Jesus established between himself and humanity. Jesus is the Son of God. That's the relationship between the Godhead, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We can hold to the faith that we profess. That is the relationship between us and Jesus. That is us saying yes to the relationship that Jesus already established between him and us. And we're just saying, all right, we want to be in that as well. The scripture also says that Jesus was tempted in every way, just as we are. That's the relationship between Jesus and not only humanity, but the human experience. This is why he can empathize with our weaknesses and our temptations, because he has a relationship with the human experience. Yet he did not sin. This is the relationship between God and his divinity and the power of the Spirit to keep him from falling into those sins and temptations and those weaknesses that he experienced. It speaks to the power of the Spirit to keep us from falling. And so it's because of all of these other relationships that we can come to the throne with confidence and receive mercy in our time of need. This whole situation is grounded in relationship. And if even one of those other relationships had failed, we could not come to God. And we definitely could not come with confidence. So this is the reason why you have to be careful about throwing away just being in relationship with God when things get hard. You shortchange yourself if you only think of God as a fixer, because the strength of all of these other relationships are also at your disposal when you go through tough times. And so heaven helps you today and strengthens you today simply because of the relationship that you have with God the Father, with Jesus Christ, with the Spirit being in you, and to the access that you have in heaven. There's no safer place to vent. There's no safer place for you to run and to retreat. The Bible encourages us in Psalms 55:2 to cast our cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. Why? Relationship. Then in 1 Peter 5:7, it says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. That's relationship. So the thing that's keeping you and strengthening you every day is your relationship with heaven. And it's all made possible through Jesus, who died for us to restore our relationship with God and establish all of those other relationships as well. So for me in my situation that I call Snowmageddon 2.0 without the snow, I fully tapped into the privilege that I had to simply talk to God. I was able to vent my frustrations. I was able to cry, which I did a lot of. I was able to be like, yo, this ain't what this is. Like, I don't feel well. I don't have water, which is critical when you don't feel well. And I have all of these other situations going on, and I was able to just get it out. And what I love about God is not judging me for the prayers that I'm praying or the frustrations that I'm having. That's what people do, right? Some of you are probably watching this going, girl, these are first world problems. What about the people who don't ever have running water? What about the people who are really struggling? God does not make me feel guilty about first world problems because God ordained these first world problems for me. This is where he dropped me. This is where he put me. And so God does not fracture the relationship or create distance in the relationship because he minimizes my problems. People do that. God does not do that. He died to reestablish the relationship. Why would he turn around and make you feel guilty for the things you bring to him? He doesn't put stipulations on which anxieties you can bring to him or which cares he actually cares about. He cares about everything I care about because he cares for me. So I was able to utilize that in those moments. God may cause me to have compassion for people who are less fortunate than I am, or move me to move resources and to help in other areas, but it's never at the expense of what I'm experiencing. And that's where I feel like we hurt one another when people have these issues and we just like, girl, that ain't nothing. Well, to God, it's something. Because if it's the thing that you're carrying around and it's the reason why you can't pray or you can't sleep or you're not well, God cares enough about you to care about it. So God never invalidates what you're going through. And that's what I love about the relationship is God is with me and he's strengthening me through whatever it is. So the second way that heaven helps you today and every day is that heaven supplies for you by releasing resources. Heaven supplies for you by releasing resources. If God is the source of everything, then heaven is the place where all of your resources come from. In Matthew chapter 6, during his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about the way that children of the king should live, basically. And when you get towards the end of the chapter 6, he addresses our basic daily needs and he instructs us on how to go about getting those needs met. So Matthew 6 verses 31 through 33 says this, so do not worry saying, what shall we eat or what shall we drink or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So Jesus instructs us to seek first his kingdom, and the basic needs will get included in the package. So basically, as children of the king, Jesus is saying, become working royals. And all of your basic needs will get taken care of. That is how it works in a monarchy. The working royals have their basic needs met by the kingdom, by the monarchy. And so Jesus is like, your Father knows that you need them. If you seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, if you are about his business, all of your basic needs will be a part of that package. Right? I can't go out sharing the gospel if my basic needs aren't being met. I can't go out and do the work of the kingdom if my basic needs aren't being met. But now there are two things that we need to talk about here, though. The first thing is we need to be honest about the fact that most of our frustrations come from God not taking care of the needs in the way or in the time frame that we think that he should. We don't get to choose what those resources look like or when those resources show up. And so when they don't look like we want them to look, and when they don't show up in the time frame that we think they should show up, a lot of times that breeds the frustration and the anger and sometimes the distance that we put between us and God. So the second thing we need to discuss is the fact that we often confuse what we actually need with what we simply want God to take care of in advance. Okay. So for me, in my situation, I wanted my water turned back on that day. And by the time we got to the third day, it was 3 days too late, and I was waiting on the resurrection of the water. And so that did not happen. That didn't even happen until a whole nother day later. And so as the days were progressing, I became more and more frustrated with God. I became more and more discouraged. And I felt like God really wasn't concerned about me because he was not providing in the way that I thought. So most people would be like, well, you need water. You got to have water in your apartment. The need at the root of that is I need water to shower. I need water to brush my teeth. I need water to use the bathroom. I need water to cook. I need water to drink, right? So I need water for specific purposes. God did not provide water in my apartment for 4 days, but my needs that required the water were taken care of. I just had to go somewhere else to get those needs met. But I had access, though. I was able to go to my mom's house and take care of all those needs. And if for some reason she was not available, I had several other options I could have utilized to be able to get those basic needs met. And so we have to be careful about being angry with God because I want the water in my apartment on, and God is saying, yeah, but I'm still taking care of your needs just by way of somewhere else. Now, whether you like it or not, did God meet the need? Yes, he did. Now, the second thing we have to address is if you're like me, we have been living blessed and abundant lives for so long that we have grown accustomed to God taking care of our needs before they become needs, which really means that God is taking care of our wants. Stay with me here. Let's say you get paid this week, but your bills aren't due till next week, but you already know this week you got enough to cover next week. God has taken care of your wants, not your needs. God has allowed you to know that you're going to have the resources in advance, and you could even pay the bills in advance. And so God has taken care of your wants before they become needs. So because we've lived in that cycle for so long, it's easy to panic and it's easy to get discouraged when we hit those seasons where God is saying, no, I'm just going to meet needs. But that's where we are when it comes to when God says that he's going to supply all of our needs. Most of us get confused and think that God has promised to take care of our wants because we want to know that we're going to have enough when the need arises. And sometimes there are seasons where God is like, no, I'm just meeting needs. Now, I know what your next question is. Well, Jasmine, what do you do when heaven or God or whoever or whatever doesn't even meet the need? What do you do when the money still don't show up and the bill is due? What do you do when the lights still got cut off, or the car still got repossessed, or the house still got foreclosed on, or your loved one still didn't get the healing, or your child didn't get the scholarship and that was the only way they were going to be able to go to school? What do you do when the ultimate noun does not do the necessary verbs? Because we've all been there. I've been there. What do you do when it looks like, and there's evidence that appears like, God didn't do his part? God didn't come through. God didn't take care of the need. Well, that leads me to the third and final point, which is heaven sustains you by God's righteous right hand. When it looks like heaven is not doing the necessary things, we have to trust that God is not only strengthening us through relationship, but also that God is sustaining us by his righteous right hand. Now, that phrase that we see in the Bible, his righteous right hand, speaks to God's power, his strength, and his faithfulness. That's God's strong hand. That's the place where we are being upheld and held by God from the place of strength, from the place of power, from the place of his faithfulness. And so if heaven is not supplying, then you have to be able to rely on heaven to strengthen you through relationship and sustain you through God's righteous right hand. Now, listen, I know, I get it. Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody even trying to hear that. I wasn't trying to hear that. When you're in the middle of a crisis, ain't nobody sitting up going, Lord, hold me up with your righteous right hand. And we're not. And we're not. So I hear you. I get it. Same boat. But that does not mean that is not true. So if you feel like heaven is not supplying your needs and you're not getting what you need, one of 5 things could potentially be happening. Number 1, you simply have not reached God's appointed time yet. So you may not be at the time frame or within the time frame in which God has already designated you to get those resources. So it may be a timing issue. The second thing is God may not see it as a need. Again, sometimes we're convinced that I need this, I need this, I need this. And God is like, yeah, no, you don't. That's really a deep rooted want. And we have deeply rooted wants to the fact that some of this stuff we don't need, but we feel like if we don't get it, we're going to die and we're not going to make it. And God is like, again, I will strengthen you and I will sustain you, but this is not a need. And so God may choose not to take care of it. The third thing is there's potentially a greater need that the delay that God is allowing will uncover or reveal. So God is purposely holding up what you need because there's something else that needs to be uncovered. So the fourth thing is God may be doing something different. God may be saying, I'm holding up what you need over here because I'm getting ready to shift this entire thing. And so I'm causing a delay over here because when I shift it, you're not even going to need this anymore. And so he could just be doing something different. Or the fifth thing, he could be doing some combination of all of those things. So in spite of all of the ups and downs, you really do have to trust that heaven will sustain you. The resources of heaven, God's righteous right hand, will sustain you. I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes. You know, the weight of the world and the pressures you may feeling or the financial stress, the relational stress or whatever can seem like it's literally going to take you out. You have to know that there are limits and boundaries on what God allows because you are in his righteous right hand. There's only so far you can fall in his hand. There's only so much your enemies can do for you. There's only so much impact that your current situation can have on you because God is sustaining you through his righteous right hand. And so in the midst of all the ups and downs that I have experienced over the last month, and let me say the situation still is not totally fixed, I can say that I cannot afford for God not to keep me no matter what happens with it. That was good enough to say again. I cannot afford for God not to keep me no matter what happens with it. The fact that it's almost been a month later and the situation is still not totally resolved, I needed God to keep me together emotionally. I needed God to heal my body physically. I needed God to keep my mind so I did not fall into mental health crisis because of all the things that I was feeling and feeling frustrated and feeling under pressure and feeling like God didn't care. All of those things can take you out. And so oftentimes while we have our eyes on it, God has his eyes on us. We can become so preoccupied with the situation that we stop taking care of ourselves. And that's what I love about God and the way that God sustains us, because he's like, I'm going to deal with it, but we need to deal with you. I can't afford for God not to keep me. And too many times we sending God out, go fix it, go fix it, go fix it, go fix it. And God is saying, no, you need me with you. The real issue is we got to keep you together. That's going to work itself out in this appointed time. But it's you that's falling apart. And that's what heaven sustaining us by God's righteous right hand actually means. It's God looking out for the totality of the situation. It's God checking in on the intangibles in our lives. It's God saying, how is your mental health? It's God saying, how is your physical health? It's God saying, how are you doing spiritually? It's God taking care of all the things we don't even pay attention to because we become laser focused on whatever this situation is. And that's how heaven helps us. Heaven helps us today and every day, especially in those situations, because heaven is strengthening us through relationship. Heaven is supplying for us by releasing resources, and heaven is sustaining us by God's righteous right hand. That's how heaven is helping us today and every day. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean that it's fun. It doesn't mean that it comes with quick fixes. And sometimes you realize that God ain't even going to fix it. But heaven can work for you today and every day until we get to that day, if you let it. And so that's the reason why I wanted to do this video and just kind of share my story, because in the midst of all of that I was going through, and that's not even the worst of the worst. Some of you have way more devastating situations you can attest to. But I want to challenge you and ask you, how did heaven sustain you and supply for you and strengthen you even in the midst of those situations that you didn't even think you were going to be able to make it through? Heaven can help you today and every day. Number one, if you have placed your faith in Jesus Christ. Number two, by the strength of all the other relationships that Jesus was very careful in establishing. And then number three, for the way in which you consciously walk out these tough situations in life and realize you're not alone and you're not by yourself. So let heaven help you today and every day until we get to that day.